The DRZ400, the veritable dinosaur found on showroom floor sporting technology that's over 20 years old, a carburetor and a dash that looks about as sophisticated as the solar-powered 4-function calculator you had in 3rd grade. It's a bike that probably needs no introduction. As the de facto choice of dual sport riders, supermoto boys, and long-distance adventure riders looking for a simple workhorse, it's a bike that just works, and it works hard. Dual sport bikes like the DRZ are very interesting motorcycles, and although we've noticed that videos posted about it gets as many views as a 5-second clip of an eraser statically sitting on a table, it does warrant further exploration. Dual sport bikes are ugly, there's no two ways about it, and the DRZ is no exception. In one of my garages, I've got about 5 motorcycles because I have a problem. There's a Hayabusa, a Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled, a Ninja 400, a CB650R, and then tucked away in the corner is the DRZ400. I've clambered family and friends to this garage to show off this part of my motorcycle obsession, and inevitably this is what happens.
Wow, you have so many bikes!
It's an astute observation.
The red one's pretty!
Pointing at either the Honda or in some cases the sled.
What's that one over there?
Typically pointing to the DRZ. You have to understand, in a world of sexy sport bikes, exotic machinery, and charismatic cruisers, the DRZ is truly a motorcyclist's motorcycle. Only someone who truly knows about bikes understands why the dual sport is such an excellent thing. You come to look past those features that only a mother could love and truly appreciate the simplicity of design, the purposeful nature of this machine. As Spite put it when he first straddled atop our DRZ, it feels like a motorcycle that's from a post-apocalyptic future, and yet later, he bought one. Here's the case I want to make in this video. The DRZ is the best second motorcycle you can buy. Let's explore this idea together. First up, why do I own a DRZ? Well, simply put, I was forced to buy it because of the wonderful members on our website and Discord server over at yammie.co. I buy these bikes, modify them, give my take on them, and then give them away to people on the website. If you want to learn how to sign up, click the link below. Oh yeah, that CB650R Ninja 400, I'm also giving them away. So I've had the DRZ400 since mid-October of 2019, and this video is coming out in like 2020, early in 2020, so it's about 3 months. I've put on 400 miles on it, taking it off-roading around town and on light cruises. So where does the DRZ400 come from? I'm very glad you asked. Starting in the 60s, ragtag motorcyclists started taking bikes intended for street duty and modifying them to tackle off-road trails and jumps. These were known as scramblers. The DRZ's lineage begins with these sorts of motorcycles. In the 70s, Suzuki started getting wins in motocross and began selling non-road legal motocross bikes to the public. Now, one thing you need to know before we move forward is that while dual sport bikes and motocross bikes looks similar, they're actually extremely different. Their power characteristics, weight, suspension, tires, and many other factors make them extremely different from a dual sport bike that was designed to go on and off-road. They released the RM series that did very well, but I want to focus on the PE series of bikes, which is the spiritual grandpa to the DR series we're covering today. In 1977, Suzuki launched the PE 250B. An enduro-style bike created to compete in, well, enduro events. Enduro events are different from motocross in that you're not on a closed circuit with controlled dirt conditions. Enduro resembles more closely with trail conditions, rocks, inclines, and steep descents. The PE 250B was evolved over the years and was made road legal by enthusiasts, which is why I consider it the spiritual predecessor to the DR. However, in 1990, Suzuki released the original DR350 dual sport bike. This ran for 11 years until 2001 when they released the updated DRZ400. And it's largely remained the same since then. But why is that? Well, the DRZ has remained the same over the last 20 years because of 2 reasons. One, grandfathered emission laws, baby. The DRZ400, if it were to be meaningfully updated, would have to pass strict and growing stricter every year emission laws. So Suzuki just keeps it the same. The other reason is economics. Now, you thought you'd get away for a video without me mentioning my degree, did you? The DRZ is a bike that has long since recouped its initial R&D costs and is now simply a money printing factory for Suzuki, netting fat margins on each DRZ400 they can sell new, which they do quite a bit. So it's unlikely we'll ever see a DRZ450 with fuel injection, fancy tech, or anything else. But the thing is, there's also no real incentive to innovate at this time either. All other but dual sports are basically as old and archaic, the only exception being Yamaha's WR250R, which we'll discuss later on. So what exactly is going on in the dual sport market? It's segmentation. Like most other markets, we're seeing a bifurcation between the haves and have-nots. Those with means and have off-roading desires are buying two different types of bikes, the high-tech adventure bike and then the hardcore trail or motocross bike, or both depending on how many means they have. People these days are not merely content owning a play bike for the trail, it has to have top-spec suspension so that you too can pretend that you can buy your way into enduro glory as you head to Romania to tackle the trails. How absolutely plebeian would it be to throw around a 20-year-old bike on the trails? Can you imagine? On the flip side, the have-nots are buying second-hand DRZs, CRFs, and even a WR if they can find one, and doing it all with these bikes. It's better to have something than nothing, right? So with this in mind, Suzuki looks at the market and says, well, we better update the V-Strom to give ADV riders something, and we gotta make sure the RM is still a good motocross bike. What is surprising though is that Suzuki hasn't tried to take a bite out of the high-end trail bike market, but there's a good reason for that as well. European motorcycle makers like KTM are absolutely dominating the field right now when it comes to off-road offerings. No one is even coming close. But even KTM, who probably has 50 different off-road flavors for motorcycling for you to choose from, isn't really investing in a dual sport bike. Sure, you can buy an $11,000 KTM that you can make road legal, or in some markets is sold as road legal, but look where the money is going to. It's going to the literal dozens of different variations of trail, enduro, and motocross bikes. At this point, no one can even keep up with the permutations of the letters E, C, F, X, R, T, P, I that KTM has. It's too many letters. I have no idea what any of them mean. Please, KTM. So what exactly is the DRZ's competition then? Well, if you're interested in an extremely detailed look, Everride has you covered and has made what is possibly the most comprehensive assessment of all dual sport bikes on the market today. We'll drop a link down below because it's a pretty great video, but for this video, I want to look at two bikes in particular. The WR250R is the DRZ's natural competitor. It's lighter, more modern, and more nimble. It's a bike that you have to wring out on trails compared to the DRZ, and is the choice of many guys and girls who want a dual sport bike they can really grow into. Seriously, I've seen people doing insane things with WRs. The WR is priced similar to the DRZ, and there's several pros and cons to both. I do recommend that Everride video for a super detailed comparison, but for my money, I'd rather have the slightly heavier and slightly torquier DRZ. The other bike is Honda's CRF250L. It's the much cheaper option by far. However, I feel like because it has the anemic 250cc and some specs that just don't really compare to the DRZ, I'd rather have a DRZ. Speaking of which, why don't we go over what this bike is equipped with. The DRZ400 has an MSRP of $67,999. Deals can be found, but if you want a brand new DRZ, expect to pay around $6 grand. It's motivated by a 398cc single that makes about 40 horsepower. It's carbureted, so have fun with that. It has a 5-speed transmission, which I mentioned because it's such a goofy quirk about this bike. It has a pretty unforgiving 36.8-inch seat height in this dual sport configuration, which some beginners might find a bit too tall. The front suspension is a 49mm cartridge style fork, has compression and rebound dampening, and 11.3 inches of travel, which is plenty to have fun with. The rear suspension is a gas-charged fork, also has compression and rebound dampening, and spring-load preload adjustability. It's got 11.6 inches of travel back there and plenty of ground clearance so you can hop over all the rocks you would like. So finally, what is it like on and off road? The DRZ400 feels very old school. If you're used to riding a bike that was designed sometime in the last decade, it's gonna feel old, no doubt about it. But there's something charming about its simplicity. It's a bike that you know that's not gonna let you down. You can almost sense the millions of miles that other happy DRZ owners have put down while you go on the road yourself. Given its tall stance, skinny dual sport tires, and lightweight, it just kind of flops right into corners, but it doesn't do so with the same flickiness that a sport bike will. With that 21-inch wheel, it's not going to have the same kind of flick in. But should you apply power when you shouldn't, the bike just kind of skips about in a predictable fashion. It isn't going to scare you if you're used to riding any other motorcycle. On trails, it feels like it can conquer anything you throw at it. It simply muscles through inclines, handles choppy ruts like it's nothing, and definitely doesn't feel like a 319-pound bike in the dirt. It happily slides the rear wheel around under power as well, not as much as something like my desert sled, but it's still a hoot in the dirt and has the potential to do so much more than I'm capable of. One thing that is great on the DRZ is low-end torque and throttle feel. The throttle being that it's a cable-actuated and carb-controlled fueling feels as direct as you could possibly want. A very intimate connection between forward acceleration and mid-corner control, the single cylinder really shines in low speeds and low revs, giving credence to the tractor factor of the DRZ as many owners point out. The suspension is sublime. These are top-end components that feel like Suzuki poured all of the money into. They work very, very well off-road and do remarkably well on-road for how much travel they have. A thing to note is that the DRZ we have is the dual sport model with that suspension setup. Brakes are a weak spot on this motorcycle. They are without a doubt the squishiest factory brakes I've ever felt and do not have much in the way of stopping power. This is a double-edged sword though, because on trails you definitely don't want an extremely grabby and aggressive front brake because you'll wash out the front end like nobody's business. But this is a bike that's required about 30% more distance and brake pressure than you're used to in order to get it stopped. Keep that in mind. You'll also feel like the brakes feel extra crazy because of how much suspension travel you have at the front. There is tons of dive on this motorcycle. Without a doubt, the DRZ is a heap of fun, but a secret weapon the DRZ has on top of other bikes is the ability to convert into a supermoto, which is why I think it makes for the perfect secondary motorcycle. And for that, I want to turn it over to Spite, who picked up a supermoto DRZ and bought it as a secondary bike.
Hey guys, Spite here, and like Yam said earlier, I did hate the DRZ at first. And not just I don't like it, we're talking about full-on boiled green beans in the cafeteria lunch hate here. It was such an atypical riding experience. The ergos were all weird, and the thing rattled like a can of marbles falling down the stairs, and the seat was so uncomfortable I felt like I was riding on a sawhorse. So why did I buy one? I mean, it's not like it vibrates any less or is any less foreign to sit on all of a sudden, right? And yeah, I mean, the DRZ400 SM, for all intents and purposes, is just a DRZ400S with more street-worthy tires. But the crazy thing is, that's literally all the DRZ needed to be my kind of bike. I mean, I started on Harleys, which are arguably some of the most mechanically imperfect bikes out there. I did a whole video on the difference between the Dual Sport and the Supermoto DRZ last week, but let me recap some of the more salient points. You've got a fancy upside-down front fork, which everyone tells me is better, and the Supermoto sits on 120/70/17s in the front and 140/70/17s in the back. Or in my case, 150/70/17s. The suspension is great now that I have a bike that's actually sprung for my weight, but seriously, I'm not sold on the whole right side up versus upside down forks thing yet. More importantly, those tires are smaller, wider, and heavier than the Dual Sport tires, which do it a world of good. Since there's more rotational mass, they're inherently more stable, even when mounted so far from the rider. They're also better in a corner. The Dual Sport wants to either stand up straight or fall over, whereas the Sumo has a really nice progressive transition from upright to leaned over. And that big thumper has plenty of grunt to get me up to about 70 miles an hour. It can probably go faster, but I stopped there out of mechanical sympathy. You know, that makes me think of a joke that I heard about the DRZ400. How do you get a DRZ to do over 100 miles an hour? You drop it out of an airplane. But the funny thing is, if you do, you could probably ride it away when it hits the ground. My DRZ has over 26,000 miles on it in the 11 years since it rolled out of the factory, and I just put another 120 on it yesterday, and it took it like a champ. I've had conversations with diehard DRZ guys in our Discord server, and the common life expectancy of the DRZ isn't measured in miles or hours, but in years. I guess that's what you get when Suzuki literally hasn't updated the bike in a decade. Like, I was still in high school when my bike was made, which is crazy to me. Perhaps the second biggest improvement made to the DRZ when it came to the street was the addition of a 310mm dinner plate of a front brake rotor. It takes some time to get used to because with the way the suspension behaves, I've accidentally stoppied the bike in quick stop situations. It's amazingly effective and kind of makes the rear brake rotor superfluous outside of specific situations, since in general I find it really only good for locking the rear tire up, which can be fun if you want to draw some inappropriate images in a parking lot. But I'm running out of time here, so let me wrap this up. If you're thinking of getting a DRZ400, I strongly suggest you take a look at the Supermoto, especially if you're not sure how much off-roading you're going to do. I mean, if people can take an R1200 GS off-road, you can take a Supermoto off-road too, so don't listen to the naysayers. But I wouldn't suggest you ride it at a dealership. It's really not enough time to know if you like the bike or not, and it took me a solid 5 or 6 good rides on the DRZ to really get it. So if I were you, I'd find a buddy who has one and borrow it for a while if you can. But if you've already got a fancy bike, or at least one you don't want to beat up on in the garage, a Sumo is such a great second bike. Take it from me, a ripped jeans wearing, curb hopping squid in training, the DRZ is almost too much fun.
In short, the DRZ truly lives up to its versatile moniker. It's a bike that will take you anywhere you want to go and does so with aplomb and without putting up a fuss. It's an absolute workhorse of a bike and can tractor up nearly anything. Oh yeah, it also does wheelies super easily. Thanks for checking out this comprehensive look on the DRZ. What do you think? Did we miss anything important? Let me know in the comments below. I do love hearing from you guys. As always, be sure to check out the link below to find out how you can win this DRZ and our CB and our Ninja 400 for free. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one.